the satisfaction right now. And I think that means that probably the pieces that I decorate are visually, the best ones are visually interesting as they are, but if someone was doing really complex food service, they would not choose these. We have Stanley Anderson plates with lots of brushwork on them in Myolica at home, and those are good at lunch. They're good if you're having like a sandwich, mac and cheese. But if somebody's doing really high presentation food, the plate competes with the food too much, and I would look for, I have some black glaze porcelain plates by Susan Tilley, and anything, you can put 2 snow peas on there and they look important. So, you know, if the food is the main thing, then you really want a plate that's very restrained. On the other hand, I want it all and I want it now, so I tend to fill things out. So I would probably put the black stuff in, but I don't know, I kind of like it. I like the sort of the pause that it gets to have no dot. But I like that I can do this back and forth and at least look at it instead of just imagining it. If I think we're all better as editors than we are as creators. So if I gave you 6 teapots and told you to pick the most resolved one, people would have different opinions and they'd have different reasons for that, but it wouldn't be hard to pick the one that you thought was the most resolved. If I hand everyone a blank sheet of paper and tell you to get 1 try, do it in pen, no erasing, draw me 1 resolved teapot, all of a sudden I've really made it a lot harder. So I think one of the things that's very helpful in learning to do anything visual is to give yourself editing room. And it always seems like I'm really busy, I have a deadline, I don't have the time, this is not productive. But having a sketchbook and using a sketchbook really helps you. And putting those options up is really useful. One of the things I sometimes do is I will draw the piece that I'm trying to figure out what to do with, and then if I'm impatient, which is often, I'll photocopy it and make 6 copies. It's probably better for me if I go draw it 6 times. And then I'll draw some surface ideas for it and put them up next to each other. And there's advice about problem solving. The first thing you should do is accept the problem, make it yours, and then you should define the problem, like what is the problem here. And then you go do research. So that might mean, for me, I go out and wander around the yard and look at the way things are put together and look at the colors I see outside and think about attitude and time of day and time of day and time of life and go look at those things. Or I might go to books or magazines and look at things. Historic ceramics is a really rich resource for me sometimes. Sometimes I think it's better to go to the original resource, and instead of looking at someone looking at plants on a pot, it's good to just go look at plants and make a direct opinion. But I really also learn from the way other people organize space. And then take those 6 copies and let yourself do things that you wouldn't normally do. When you're on pottery, you're really conservative because you've had to make it, trim it, dry it, bisque it, glaze it. And by that time, you've got all this work invested, and you think, you know, you could do something wild and crazy, but on the other hand, what if you ruin it? And having one of something is really deadly. And the more you like it, the deadlier it is. The more time you spend on it, the deadlier it is, the more conservative you become. So it's really great to have those 12 copies, and you can do stuff that you would never do. Like, what would this look like if Aunt Virginia decorated? Okay. You know, like, what would it look like if someone who doesn't work in this material decorated this? Or what would it look like if I was doing this thinking about patterns in fabric or things in nature? And do a lot, and then put them up, and then edit. And it's okay to do things you hate, especially when you're researching. And knowing why you hate something is halfway toward knowing what you might want to do. So it's good to put those things up there. And then the next step is if you run out of all the ideas that you can think of, is go pass it out to other people because they've always wanted to do a makeover on your work anyway. And pass it out and say, just draw me some surface on this. And again, somebody will do something that you never thought of, and you'll think, that's really cool, I would never come up with that. And someone else will do something, and you'll think, I would never do that. But again, ask yourself, why wouldn't you? You know, like, I would never do that, it's too busy. Well, that must mean I like things that are not that busy. Is that true? Or is it the way that the activity, is it the activity or the way the activity moves? And I think you can get a lot of information from taking the time to do those steps. I think it's important to use a sketchbook. In art school, they made us use a sketchbook. And I confess that I don't use mine as much as I would like to. And one of the things I'm going to do when I retire is use my sketchbook more. This summer at the Archie Bray, I'm going to use my sketchbook more. You know, there's some, you're welcome to look at my sketchbook. It's not a thing of beauty, it's just a workspace. And it's me trying to solve problems and trying to record things. When you sketch, you make this connection between your eye and your brain and your hand. And we have a lot of things that we do that with. Like if you've ever learned to touch type, you're making that kind of connection. If you know how to drive a standard transmission, you know how to make that connection. When I was in my 30s, I was teaching and needed a new car, and I didn't have much money. Bless you. So as an economic decision, I bought a standard ship, and I'd never driven one before. Fortunately, I was in Baton Rouge, where it's very flat, which was very reassuring. But I spent probably 3 weeks really suffering. Like every time I saw a traffic light, it was, oh no, it's a red light. Where am I? What gear am I in? What should I be doing with the gas? What should I be doing with the clutch? And you know, after about 3 weeks, though, it became body knowledge. So my eyes would see that red light, and I wouldn't even have to think, oh no, there's a red light. Your body responds. Your body does what it needs to do. I can't tell you where the letters on the keyboard are, but I can look at text, and I can make it come out my fingers, because I type so much now.
So you're saying that when you sketch, you make the connection between hands, brain, and eyes?
Between your eyes, your brain, and your hands. And when you start to learn to draw, it's like trying to learn how to play a musical instrument, or trying to learn how to touch type, or trying to learn how to drive a stick shift. It seems kind of painful and unpleasant, often, because you have to work really hard at what you're seeing and making it come out your hands. And if you do it regularly, though, you get to this point where you see it and it comes out your hand and you're not quite sure how you did it. That doesn't mean that you don't have to work at it. You do. But this other thing happens where you focus on looking more than you focus on what your hand's doing as you start to pick that up and make that your knowledge. And instead of it being limiting, I think it's really something that makes you more spontaneous and lets you be even more intuitive, because you don't have to be thinking about the skill all the time. That you've made that body knowledge and you've made this connection. There's a woman named Betty Edwards who wrote a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And Betty was proposing that one part of your brain deals with the logical, rational, observable, and the other part of your brain deals with the spontaneous and intuitive. And her example of something An example of something that would be very rational would be like balancing your checkbook, where you can follow yourself doing the steps and putting things in columns and addition and subtraction. And then the example of the spontaneous, a lot of times people who commute the same way every day remember leaving home, and they remember getting to their destination, and they were somewhere in the zone in the meantime. And that you were paying attention to traffic, you made all the right turns and got to your destination, you stopped for the red lights, you went on the green, you avoided the chuck holes, you didn't bang into anybody's bumper, but you weren't processing that in a very front-brain way. You were on autopilot somehow. And you can't watch yourself on autopilot, because as soon as you become the observer, you're no longer on autopilot. So, yeah, and so you can't do that if you don't know how to drive, and you don't know where you're going. You would never suggest to someone with their learner's permit that they think about the big game on Friday while they're driving. And if you're going someplace you've never been before, you can't go on autopilot. You have to be very front-brain about where you're supposed to turn and how it's going to be and where you need to end up. Sketching is like learning how to drive and figuring out where you want to go. And it actually lets you become more spontaneous and more intuitive, because you build in those things. We see a lot of things. We look at a lot of things without really seeing them. There's so much visual information as we pass through the world that our brain throws away a big part of it. Like, if you ask me what color was the hallway where I walked in, I have no clue. And I probably don't even know in my building at school where I've taught for 20 years, I don't think I can tell you what color the foyer is. I don't know. It's not important. It didn't matter. But drawing makes you stop and really look, like, what is that proportion? And very often, you find out you only thought you saw it, but you didn't really, because the thing on the page doesn't look at all like the thing that's actually there. So it helps you see, and it gives you this connection between your eye and your brain and your hand. That's really useful. And there are times where you look at a blank page or a blank pot and you think, I don't know what to do. Some days it pops into your mind and you can kind of see it like, oh yeah, that's what I should do. And that doesn't really come from nowhere. It comes from all the things that you've put in. Things you've seen, things you've sketched. It's useful to cut things out and put them in your sketchbook, but I think you get more from actually drawing. And it will be painful to start out with, but it's really fun. It really builds, and it's like exercise. One day is not going to do much more or less, but if you were to draw every day for 5 minutes, it would really do something. So I'm a big proponent of sketchbooks. The other thing about sketchbook is you have to realize that sketchbook is not making art, it's a workspace. So a lot of people are self-conscious that their drawings are not pretty. It doesn't matter, it's not about that. And when I was in grade school, we borrowed our textbook.
Thank you.
And the only place we were supposed to write in that book was the line in the back that said loan 2. And they checked at the end of the year to see if you made any bad marks in your book. So it took me a little while to feel like it was okay to draw in a bound sketchbook, that I could give myself permission. It's good. It's good to have a place to collect all that stuff. And let yourself have that time and space. It's also helpful if you find a tool that you like. And I found that a pencil was too small a tool for me. The idea that I would cover a whole page with the point of a pencil in drawing class made me really crazy. And so they have other tools these days. If you're looking for something portable, they make brush pens. And it'll be fixed in. You want to try? They come in many colors. They're at the art supply store. And I really like drawing with a brush pen in my sketchbook. I've gotten to the point, and if you press down on that, and you can also go kind of sideways with it, and get a little bit of quality of mark with it, it's kind of fun. But I've come to like pencil now. It's taken me a while, but I'm there.
I've always said I hate to draw.
Yeah, well, find a different tool.
Oh, okay.
And buy yourself a sketchbook that you like, something that's kind of fun or pretty. Get a tool that you like. The other thing I like is I like the sort of terracotta colored pencils. I just like the colors they look.
What's this called?
It's a brush marker. So I highly recommend all those things, and I do recommend drawing. Not for anybody else. It's not about making art. It's not about making a drawing as art. It's about you doing art exercises that are visual exercises for yourself. All right, I'm going to set up the laptop and show you the video, the Alan Cager Smith brush demo video, because he's a magician. He's really very good.